All right, welcome everybody to the Competition Archery Media Podcast, where we explore all things pertaining to competition archery. I'm your host, PJ Riley, and with me is Josh Grine, and the CAM Podcast is brought to you by B3 Archery. Today, Josh, we have the lady who seems to be winning everything she competes in archery this year, Tanja Gellenthien. Tanja, thanks for being here.
Thank you. Thanks for having me.
It's been a good year for you so far, and we're just getting started.
I'd say so. You know, it's always fun to start out the year on a good note, because then you can kind of relax a little bit in your brain. Not that you're slowing down or anything, but you can be like, okay, at least I got a couple podiums under my belt, and just.
You won that. We should mention that you won the first two ASA events in the Women's Known Pro, and you won the World Archery World Indoor Series Finals in Vegas. That's a lot of indoor worlds and whatever.
I usually just,
Yeah, so let's start with the ASAs. Women's Known Pro, especially the last one here in Fort Benning. That was, I'm going to say that yours and Open Pro were like the two most exciting. And Open Pro actually didn't come down to the last shot so much, where yours, you had to hit the 14 or you weren't winning.
I know. It was probably one of the most exciting shoot downs that I've ever been in or seen in our class. Yeah. You had to shoot more than 30 up in our class to make the shoot down, which I think is a first. So even that was really, really cool to see.
And on the last shot, how far was your last shot?
That was 36 yards.
Okay, 36 yards. 4 of 5 of you hit the 14.
Yeah.
On the last shot.
I know. Where there's supposed to be more pressure and it's supposed to be harder, Neither me or Paige hit the one at 28 yards when we were supposed to.
So what is that like? I know Darren asked you about it when we were there, but what's that like? What's the pressure like? I heard you say, it's like any other in practice, but come on. You need a 14 to win. I got to imagine the nerves are going crazy.
Oh, you're definitely nervous. It's one of those where it's within reach, but you still don't have it, and you still need to make a really, really good shot. And, in target archery, you're okay, I just have to hit the metal. I know where the metal is. This one's like, I can aim there and I can trust my shot, but it still might not be there.
Sure, yeah.
So,
I was going to say, did your sight picture look good, or was the pin moving?
It actually looked really good.
Okay.
I took a couple extra long breaths right before I shot, and that always really helps me to just calm my shot down enough that I can aim somewhat where I want to and execute.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And the one in Foley, as I remember, for you to win it, it was not quite that dramatic at the end. I think the drama was for second and third.
Yeah, no, I think I just had to shoot a 10 to win on that one.
And then, of course, the Indoor World Series Finals. I mean, that was a straight match to begin with. So, that obviously shooting against. I just drew a blank.
Sarah Priels.
That's right, Sarah. Okay. Yeah. Is that one that you have won before?
Yes.
I've won that one.
I podiumed many times, but I haven't won it since that was in 2017.
Okay, gotcha.
Yeah.
And now, as we were just talking, you're getting ready for the first World Cup, which is in Florida. Mm-hmm. Are you planning to do a bunch of those, or are you just doing this one because it's in the U.S.?
Just this one. The other ones are far away, and it's just a little too much this year with everything going on. And so I was like, I can do Florida. I'll drive down, have my own car, and if I don't make it or anything, I can just drive right home. Whereas if you go to Asia, you're kind of stuck in Asia.
Yes. Right.
Yeah.
So let's talk about starting the year, what this does for you. What is your plan? Obviously, you're going to shoot all the ASAs. What else is on your schedule for this year?
Well, so we're doing Reading. Reading's coming up pretty fast. The NFA events, and I'll put in whichever USAT I can make it to, but I know one of them is on top of an ASA, so I'll miss that one. And just, it seems like all of the events are kind of overlapping this year, so I'll try to fit in whatever's possible, but also where we have a babysitter.
Yes. We should mention baby Thor came when?
August last year.
Okay. So a couple things I want to talk about. First off, let's talk about that. So you and Braden now have a baby. You're both working at GAS Bowstrings. Time is tighter now than it was a couple years ago.
Yes, for sure. It just disappears. Like I try to go practice, and all of a sudden 5 hours will have gone by, and I'll have only shot like 30 arrows, and I'm like, what? But it's in between, watching him, sending emails, or just doing other stuff. It just
How does that affect your archery? I mean, you're still winning and competing against the best in the world, but
sometimes I can feel it, mostly in that I'm not as strong as I used to be. Which for ASAs, you shoot 20 arrows a day, so I don't feel it as much, but we'll see next week in Florida where it's 100 arrows a day.
Right.
And they're a lot closer together, and it's a different speed. So I think that's when we'll really see it, because I could tell when we shot NFA Indoor Nationals, that was a lot of arrows, and you shoot 5 arrows per end, and I got really tired, and it took a bigger toll on me than it has in the past. And I didn't shoot that well at that event just because, it's not what I'm used to.
Are you surprised that now, like, the priority for the year is ASA and Reading? So now Tanja Gellenthien, who shot, all these World Cups and stuff, you're a 3D person now. You're a 3D archer.
Different than it used to be. I like shooting the ASAs. They're a lot of fun. They're a lot quicker than going to a World Cup, and cheaper. But
for sure.
It definitely wasn't necessarily what I was expecting when the year started, but I'm happy with it. And, going to the ASAs is going to be a lot of fun.
Yeah. You've been in that class since the beginning. What are your thoughts about, we were talking about this on the broadcast, me and Darren, that the level of competition has definitely risen in your class for sure.
It definitely has. I think it's really cool to see. And I'm hoping that the class will continue to grow, and I think we have a good, there are a lot of girls who make the shoot down. It's never the same 5 girls. And I hope everyone out there who's contemplating whether or not to shoot her class can see that it's totally doable and possible to make the shoot down, and hopefully get them to shoot our class.
Yeah, and there's a 17-year-old Annabelle Moore out there.
I know,
Danielle Woody, I don't know how old she is, but I know she's still in college. She's very young. How is that for you to see the ranks, the young ladies like that coming up?
See, when you put it like that,
I'm making you sound like, you're the old veteran.
we all say it, but in my head, I still feel like I'm one of the young ones. I used to be the youngest one, and now when you look at the field, I'm the old one. So it's weird, but I mean, it's cool because it's what we need for the class to survive.
Yeah, for sure. That's what you need, new competitors. And that one has grown. I forget how many were in the first year. I want to say it was high teens, low 20s. And I believe this one
it was
you had
like 21.
Yeah.
34 at this one.
34 at this last one.
That might be our highest, which is cool.
Yeah, that's the record.
Wow. Oh, okay. Gotcha.
Oh, cool.
Yeah, that's just awesome to see that folks are coming out and jumping in there. And, that's a great class for sure.
Yeah. I just hope it keeps growing, just.
Now, did you have, when you went into the shoot down in Foley, were you leading that one at the start?
Yeah, I was up 4 or 6 points.
You're leading right now for shooter of the year.
Yeah.
Hey, has that been a goal? I imagine it's a goal now, but
I mean, it's always in the back of your head, and everyone wants to win shooter of the year at least once. So now that I have a running at it, I'm definitely gonna full speed ahead and try to, win it at the end of the year.
Is that obviously I know the goal is to go into each event and to win that tournament, and then shooter of the year takes care of itself. But do you think that will get into your head at all? Like maybe I need to not be so aggressive because I don't want to lose anything, but
it doesn't normally. The only thing that might get into my head, is one of those things where if you do stay aggressive and stay on it and then start missing, and then you kind of have to, you're like, well, my good shots are not hitting. Okay, I need to change game plans, and then you go too safe because you don't want to drop too many points. And
right.
The solution to it all is just keep winning.
For sure.
Much.
I mean, if you keep winning, shooter of the year will happen.
That's the easy way to put it.
Well, I have a question about that because you've shot 436 at both events, which is monster score in that class. We mentioned that at Fort Benning, we saw record attendance, but the internet whiners when that class started and Paige won everything.
Oh, yes.
Said she was going to kill the class.
Yes.
Now there are a half a dozen ladies shooting those monster scores and there's record attendance. So tell us a little bit, what is the mentality of the ladies in your class? Because clearly they're great scores and it's growing. So the internet whiners apparently don't have it right.
No, I think there's room for everyone in our class. And Paige shot amazing that first year. And I think she set the pace for where we want to be. And sometimes we make it to that and sometimes we don't. But I think it's a really good goal to have. That's where we want to be. But it's hard to maintain that, to keep winning that much. And at one point, I can't remember, was it Morgan Reeves who beat her first? Or
I think it was Morgan, because Morgan was only 2 or 3 points behind her last year in shooter of the year.
Yeah. Yeah. And Morgan took the first one. And I think that kind of opened up, for others being like, okay, it's possible. And once one person realizes it's possible and, everyone else is like, okay, we can do this.
As we talked about, more and more ladies coming over and being able to shoot really good scores to compete. Mm-hmm. A lot of them are transitioning or coming, not necessarily transitioning, but coming from the archery world or the target world. What did you have to change, if anything, in your practice regimen to become successful at ASA and 3D shooting?
I feel like coming from target and going to ASA took me years to figure out what to change and make better. Because coming from target, you shoot so many arrows an end, and a qualification is 72 arrows. So sometimes your mindset is, I shot a 9, it's fine. I'll shoot a 10 on the next one. It's okay. I can make up for it later on. It's not a huge deal. And it took me a long time to kind of rewire my brain for 3D, where that first arrow really, really does matter. You can't go out there and just shoot all 10s. You can't make up for it later. You know, you need those 12s, you need those bonus rings. And I think just shooting more of those ASAs and realizing that my score wasn't, you know, necessarily where I wanted it to be or where it needed to be for me to make the shoot down. And taking an extra second before every arrow to be like, okay, this one's really important. You only have 20 shots. You don't have 72 or 90. You know, it's one arrow, and kind of treat it like a shoot off, if that makes sense.
Yeah. Did you change anything in your setup to help you with that?
Not necessarily, just because I like my bows to feel a certain way, if that makes sense. And I want to have that same shot, not necessarily process, because you're changing it a little bit for 3D, because sometimes you need to aim longer or more precise just in general. But I still like the bows to feel the same and draw the same. And sometimes we have such a short time from an ASA to a USAT, so I don't want there to be like a huge difference in weight or draw weight or anything, or draw length. So I always try to set them up somewhat the same, so I don't, you know, go from an ASA to a USAT and be like, whoa, what is this?
Did it take, would you say part of the process too was learning where to aim on those targets?
Yes, that part, it takes a while. And even if you shoot and practice it a lot, it's all about just shooting more of them, and not just practicing, but also at tournaments and in events where you're scoring and it matters. Because I think most people have a tendency to be like, okay, I know that's right where the 12 is, or at least, you know, that's where my brain thinks it is. And then as soon as you start scoring, you're like, okay, normally I would just aim right on it, but what if I aim, you know, lower 12 at like 12 o'clock, you know, and then you start missing a lot more because you're aiming on the safe side instead of going right for them as you normally would. So it's one of those, you learn your group size at different distances, and you learn if you're aiming safe, how far safe you can without missing, and, you know, all those things that, yeah.
And if the target's quartered, you know,
exactly.
We try to set them real straight and for everybody to shoot at, but
do you?
That's a conversation for Scott. So did you, when you made the transition, how many 3D targets did you have? Or not, I keep saying transition, but when you started 3D?
When I started, I had none.
Okay. So it's possible.
And now you have.
It is possible, yeah. And then I think we bought a deer to have a deer, and then we bought a turkey later on. And then we just got to all the ASAs pretty early, so we had more days to practice them.
Now you have a pretty good range there at GAS. I think I've seen Eric's got a bunch of targets out there.
He does, yeah. And we go to, so half an hour from where we live, there's a shop called In Range, and they do indoor 50 meters 3D every Friday, which we used to go to a lot. And it was just a lot of fun. You know, you could go no matter what the weather was like and just look at them.
Huh. Do you feel like you have a pretty good handle now of like, and for me, the thing I notice is even if I know the targets, man, the lighting just changes week in and week out, day in and day out. And then, oh, it should be right there and it's not because it's in a shadow, blah, blah, blah. Do you feel like you have a better handle of that now?
Sometimes. It's, you know, it was a good first 2 events, but watch me go to London and just be,
What do you think is the reason for your success early? Because it's not that the competition was soft, you had to shoot big scores.
I think I'm just more focused on the few arrows that I do get to shoot. I don't get to shoot as many as I did before. I don't get to practice hundreds of arrows every day. And so I think for me, do I only get to shoot 60 arrows that day? Then it better be 60 really, really good arrows. And so I think that also helps with 3D because every arrow is really important.
Yeah. How often do you beat Braden? Be honest, he's not here.
At 3D, I got him pretty good, I think. The target, I don't know if that doesn't happen as much. He still gets me every time.
So Braden and Tanya, that is like archery's power couple.
It right now.
Is there a more successful couple out there? I don't think so.
Think so. There's a pile of medals. In
every discipline, you guys have accomplished something. So
yeah,
we're in royalty right now, PJ.
do you ever now? And yes, and I've talked to Braden about this, but Thor, he's not going to be allowed to pick up a bow. I understand. Golf clubs only.
Yeah, he wants him to do golf. Well, I mean, I'm okay with golf. It's better than him, getting injured at football or any of those things. So I can handle golf.
What's it like now? Talk about this a little bit. Being a wife, a mom, and you're working, and a professional archer. What does that look like? Like, is that a doable, sustainable thing?
I don't know. Ask me again in 1 year from now. It's definitely, you need a lot of help. You need good family and friends to help you out. We couldn't do it without Braden's mom traveling with us and watching him while we shoot. So it's definitely not a thing that you just do on your own or alone. You need. Yeah.
I'm guessing even working at GAS, obviously Eric understands what's happening. So I'm sure Tanja Gellenthien needs to go shoot at the World Cup. That's more important than what you do there, although that work still has to be done.
Yeah, and most of what I do for them is just on my computer. So I do most of it, work from home. And so even if I'm at the World Cup, I'll take some time at night or in the morning, whenever, before I shoot, and I take care of my work then.
Gotcha.
Yeah. You always have downtime at a World Cup.
Yeah, that one especially. I was going to say, if you had to text in to Eric, hey, Eric, I'm in the World Cup final, so I'm going to have to get to these orders a little bit later today. I'm sure he's good with that.
I'm sure he'd be okay with that,
yeah. What's your favorite discipline of archery? You talked about World Cups, and you've shot all the formats. What's your favorite format to shoot in?
My favorite. I like really long distance stuff. So I love just target shooting 50 meters, but I really like field because we get to shoot 80 yards. And I just think that's super fun.
Redding, I'm guessing that's one.
I like Redding, but I don't love it the same way because they're dots and not targets. Yeah. I have never quite figured out Redding.
I was going to say, have you won that one?
No.
No. Okay.
No, for me, Redding has always been one of those, I always misset my sight or do something stupid. So it's one of the ones I'm still chasing.
Gotcha.
Yeah.
What else is there while we're on the subject?
Yeah.
Tour Nationals, the Classic, LAS Classics, that's kind of NEAM. I mean, I guess that's kind of in there.
Yep. One NEAM.
ASA Shooter of the Year.
That one. Yep. That one I'm ready.
And then ASA.
Huh. Wow, that's a pretty good resume now that I'm thinking about it. I we see you win these tournaments, but when you put them all together in your head, That's a pretty good resume. What are your thoughts about that? I mean, we always talk about Paige has won everything in archery. Except for Reading and ASA, you have two.
Yeah, I mean, I think we all just want to keep adding to it. It's one of the best feelings in the world is to win like one of these big events, and that's why we all keep doing it. And I don't think any one of us wants to stop. It's not like we win Vegas or Reading and we're like, okay, I'm done now. Then we're like, okay, well, how do I win it again next year?
How was that indoor World Series final, incidentally, in that new venue? So you were up there shooting on the big stage. What was that like, and how was that different from the South Point venue?
I thought it was a really, really cool finals venue. I couldn't see the audience as well as you could at South Point, obviously, because all the spotlights were kind of
right.
So, but I could hear them, and it felt big to be out there anyway. Like I thought it was cool and looked cool.
I'll ask you for one reason, the giant screen that you were shooting underneath, was that distracting?
I honestly didn't even notice it when I shot. And sometimes I like having it there because it means I don't have to look with my binos, because I'll just shoot and then I'll look up at the screen and
Gotcha. We were there was a tournament here actually at Spooky Nook where we have the classic. It was a NASP tournament and they had those screens. We saw some differences between Vegas and what we would do, but it seemed like the people who were in it liked seeing those screens there overhead.
Yeah, I think screens are always good. Honestly, one of the worst, like not worst, that sounds bad, but like one of the places where you notice it the most is Lancaster. For some reason, when you shoot at Lancaster and your face is like right there, and sometimes you look at yourself and you're like, oh no, wait, go back.
Maybe it's the lighting in there. Everything's kind of dark and funnels towards that. It's just when you're on that platform, it is right there.
Yeah. I wouldn't want to see myself either.
One of the things I want to ask and talk about is Denmark and archery, because I mean, you coming from Denmark, Stefan Hansen, Matthias Fullerton, what in the world is going on over there? What is archery like? And were there a lot of clubs? How did you get involved, and what was the path?
Martin the Damsbows, they're also Denmark, right?
Yeah. And so Denmark is such a small country for archery too. We're not very many people, but archery is such a tiny, tiny sport. Like you tell someone random in Denmark you go to archery and they're like, what? That's a sport? And you can do that? And so everyone in the sport. It's smaller than it is in the States, but a lot of the success comes from Dansbo, and I've mentioned him a couple times, but Dansbo trains the younger kids. And so growing up in archery and like training and how to do it and everything, Dansbo was the one to look up to and the one we asked questions. And, he taught me how to shoot and how to hold my bow and all those things. So, he's a lot of the reason for me or Stefan or Maddie. He's always there. He's a huge help. And
how old were you when you started?
I was 13. So I was pretty old compared to most people.
And how did you, what got you into archery? How did you discover it?
So it was school. I was in school and we had one of those things where we went to like this old town back in the medieval ages or whatever it's called. And we shot a bow there and I was like, that's kind of cool. So I found a club that was closer to me and they gave me a recurve for a couple weeks, and I'm like, this is pretty cool. I like this. And they were like, do you want to try this compound? And they brought out a compound, and it had like so many strings and cables on it. I was like, yeah, no, that's not for me. That looks way too complicated. He was like, okay, that's fine. And he brought it back like a week later, and he's like, just shoot one shot. And so I shot it one time, and I'm like, this is mine now. Yeah.
And so how long from that point until you did your first international competition?
That was in 2008, and I think it was 2011. I won my first international one. It was a Junior World Cup in Cyprus. And it was funny because the first couple of years I shot, I didn't know a whole lot about archery. I was shooting for fun. I had a lot of friends there, and I just really enjoyed going there and shooting my bow and hanging out with friends. And then one summer I went to, it was like an archery camp, like I think lasted 2 weeks in the middle of summer. Danspo stopped by, and he told his story about being on the national team and traveling on the national team. And it was a story about doping control, I think. And I thought it sounded like the coolest thing ever. And I was like, okay, this is what I want to do. So I got back from that camp, and every morning my parents would drop me off at the range on their way to work. And then they picked me up when they got back home. And so I just spent those 8 hours on the range every day. And at the end of that summer, I made my first international one.
Well, is it a big, like you said, it's a small country and it's a small sport, but is it like, was it easy to access? Was it easy for you to be able to find equipment and a place to shoot and a coach?
So you can find places to shoot. It's not super hard. Coaches aren't, most clubs that you shoot at have one, but they're not super high level or anything. They'll usually help you out with the beginner stuff, and then after that you're kind of stuck. And equipment, that was before I knew Danspo, and I didn't know he had a shop. So the only thing that was anywhere near me, because back then Danspo lived like an hour away, he was like out in the country. He moved Baldur's and his shop to the city now. So, but then I bought all my equipment from some guy in a basement. And that was all there was, you know. And there was this one guy. So it's.
Did you back then, would you have ever thought that you would be where you are now? Did you know that was even possible?
No, I did not know. It was, you know, I heard Danspo's stories about being on the national team, and I was like, that is really cool. I want to do that. And then I didn't even know that compound wasn't on the Olympics, or so I didn't pick any of it because of that. I just thought shooting a compound bow was the coolest thing I'd ever done. And I kept doing it because it was super cool. And I think, my first, like when I started going pro, it was 2017, like the 6 months or a year leading up to that, I almost quit archery because I had reached a point where I wasn't shooting well and I couldn't figure out what was wrong, and it had gone on forever. And I was like, okay, well, if I can't figure out what's going on, what's the point? Because I'm not shooting the scores I need to. And if I can't get there, I don't want to be spending all this money. And I gave it one last shot. And after that, it just kind of took off.
Do you know what it was that you had to figure out?
Yes. So it's such a small thing, but it's one of those things that you don't notice until you take a closer look, and it ended up being my balance. So a lot of people, when they take a break in between arrows, they rest their bow on their leg, and then they kind of lean back on one leg. So what would happen is if I'd never put the weight back on the other leg. And so imagine like I was shooting and was basically putting all the weight on one leg, and you can't shoot like that. You can't aim like that. And it's just, it doesn't work. But I'd been doing it for so long, I never noticed. And just bad habits.
Right.
PJ has a lot of them.
Yes.
So you had mentioned in there, like paying for, you didn't want to pay for shoots if you weren't going to do well. We know what the path is in the U.S. for somebody who's pursuing archery, but what is the funding like in Denmark, and being the national team? What is the path for a pro archer?
There is no funding, and that's why you have to really think about it a little bit more, because we don't have funding, and back then we don't have 3D over there, so I couldn't go shoot 3D really, or we don't have any ASA type stuff really.
Well,
or
you will.
Huh?
Well.
Yeah. Or any money events. So the only ones we could go to are international ones that are really, really expensive. And so it's one of those where, well, if you're going to be $3,000 to $5,000 out of pocket, you kind of want to make sure that you at least are shooting well. Otherwise, it feels like a lot of money to spend, especially when there's no funding.
So when you were doing that to start out, were you paying for everything, or were you under contract with somebody where they at least covered your travel?
In the beginning, it was all on me. And in the beginning, there was a small bit of funding. And so unfortunately, with how archery works in Denmark, our compound funding is based on how the recurves do, because it's all tied up with the Olympics. Yeah.
Denmark archery, if you're paying attention, you got 3 of the best compound shooters in the world. Maybe you should reevaluate your funding.
It's sad, but they don't care.
Speaking of Martin, didn't he shoot a 900 this year?
He did.
Yeah.
All right. I'm going to 4. You've got 4 of.
Yeah. I'm like, I keep hearing, I have no idea how old he is. It seems like to me, I've been hearing about him forever.
I could mention his age, but I don't know if he wants me to.
Yeah, probably not.
But good for him that he still can do it. I mean,
yeah, I can say this much. He's Braden's age. And they have known each other for going on 20 years now. I think they met at like their first world championship somewhere in New York, I think, back in forever ago.
Right. Braden, he's like 64 now, isn't he? Didn't he just turn? No.
Seems like he's been around a long time.
Sorry. Just messing with you, Braden. That I in Denmark, it does seem strange that such top level coming out of there. I don't know that I know anything else about Denmark. That's like, okay, what are they known for? Well, to me, they're known for Stefan Hansen, Tanja Gellenthien. So what would you do? What do you think you would do if the archery hadn't panned out, or hadn't panned out the way that it did? Like
So right before I went to Vegas in 2017 when I won, I had just applied to college. I wanted to be a physical therapist, and I think it was right after Vegas, I found out I got in. But because of all of that, I ended up turning it down. But that was my plan, and that was where I would have gone had archery not happened.
Yeah. So, wow, it was that close.
Yeah.
You win Vegas, boom. The story for Tanja turns around.
Yep.
That's amazing. That's always Levi has a story like that as well with 3D. That's amazing how that happens.
It is. Sometimes I think it's just meant to be.
Yeah. Huh.
But there's an element of that story, like I talk to a lot of archers and they're waiting for somebody to bring in more money or pay their bills. And whether it's archery or other sports, it's like, no, there's a rite of passage. Like
there is.
I know Braden loves golf. Like I've talked to guys. I mean, they're sleeping in cars, going to tournaments, trying to qualify for. They don't start out making all that money, and I love hearing the stories. I had to evaluate: do I want to continue to spend my money to try to make this work? And there is a rite of passage, a sacrifice that no matter what pro sport you're going to be a part of. You hear that in the journey. So
yeah.
Well, yeah, I was working 2 jobs, 12-hour days, and shooting on the side too. So it's paying for all my archery equipment, all of those things. So you really do have to.
How long were you doing that? The 2 jobs?
2 jobs I did for a year, I think. Before I was like, no, it's too much.
Yeah.
And then I kept one of them while I shot on the side too.
Were you seeing enough in there during that time that you were like, okay, this is still doable. I'm still on the path. Or I'm sure there were times where you're like, forget it. I'm done.
Sometimes you're like, okay, but then you go to one of the international events or you meet other archers and you're like, okay, I mean, I might not be winning, but this is still really fun. And I think even if I hadn't gone the direction I did, I think I would have still kept shooting and going to events, just not as many as I'm doing right now, because I still love archery and what I get from it in the events, even when I don't win.
At what point did you meet Paige or did you know about Paige before you met her?
Yes. So first time I really met or saw Paige was, I think it was 2015. It was Youth World Championships in Yankton. Yeah. And that was when I first saw her. I don't think we talked because I was this, some random girl from Denmark. And I didn't even shoot against her or anything. So we didn't really come across each other, but it was, yeah.
Could you, do you still have Denmark citizenship? If there's a international tournament, who do you shoot for?
So I shoot for Denmark. And I could have actually switched this year because I didn't shoot a single World Archery event last year, and they require you to take a full year off from shooting before you switch nationality. So I could have switched to the US. But shooting from Denmark, I'm very fortunate that because we're such a small country and we don't have a lot of archers, I don't have to shoot trials or anything. I could just be like, hey, coach, I want to go to Florida. And he's like, okay, cool, I'll sign you up. Whereas if I went to shoot for the US, me going to Louisiana instead of the USAT, that would already mess up my ranking,
Right.
So it was a decision I made to keep shooting for Denmark. It made more sense in that way.
Denmark looks at the depth chart and says, Tanja Gellenthien. Yeah, that's a sure. You're in. Is there what do you see in the future? Where do you see this going?
It's always one of those things where I don't know, because in the beginning when I went on this, professional archery journey, I was like, let's see where it goes. If I do it 1 year, that's really cool. If I do it a couple more years, that's really awesome. And now we're going on 8 years, and so it's, I don't know.
I always excuse me for being the wet blanket in the room, but now being over 50, I always think back then, like at some point you got to be thinking about, well, how do I plan for the future? Now you got a kid to think about as well. I always wonder what that looks like, how you map that out or whatever.
Yeah, I'm not very good with planning, so I just kind of
That's probably a good way to do it.
take it one day at a time.
Just keep going. Yeah.
Yeah, it works right now. And if at one point I wake up and realize it doesn't, I'll figure out a new game plan.
Yeah. You did other sports. Am I correct in that?
Yeah.
Okay.
Before I did archery, I did swimming for 10 years.
Okay. Gotcha.
Yeah.
I think we talked about that once. Yeah, that's what I used to do. Mm-hmm. That was awful. But I can swim. So I know I'm not going to drown. So that's the good thing there.
I'm a great swimmer.
Competitive swimming, man, that was. And I had to do it actually. My sister was the good one. I just got dragged along because it was, well, she's going, you're going too.
You're like, okay.
Yeah. Anyway. Got any more questions for Tanja?
I want to circle back because I think that something that, and we talked about it, and then you said about working 2 jobs. So I love busting internet myths and archery myths out there. And the thing that I always hear is like, well, yeah, if I got paid to do nothing but shoot my bow, I could do that too. And I hate that because like, oh yeah, no, you couldn't. Like, number one, you can't. You're only the champion of your own backyard. However, you worked 2 jobs until you were successful. What would you tell the young people out there that maybe have aspirations of competing at the level? I don't even want to say a pro archer, but competing at the level of archery that you're competing at. What advice would you give to somebody that's looking at that?
You got to work harder than you think you need to. You know, back when I was in school, let's say I was going to class later and had a 10 a.m. class. I'd wake up at 5 or 6 so I could go shoot beforehand, go to school. And so I'd still have time for homework or my job after school too. So it's one of those where, I have school. It's like, yeah, but you still have more hours in the day. If you really want it, you'll find the time to shoot your bow.
So do the work, then get paid instead of the modern, well, I'll do the work when I get paid.
Yeah.
That's just not how archery works.
That's not how anything should work, but especially archery.
And there are several young ladies in your class that I imagine are approaching that decision of what do you do, because they're young and they're certainly showing signs of talent, but at some point you're going to come to a crossroads. What do I do?
Yeah.
Like you said, if you want it, work.
You'll figure it out. And even, now I'm working for GAS, Kaylee Pettifer is a nurse.
Yeah.
A lot of us have jobs on the side, and we still figure out how to practice and do all the things we need or want to do.
You're not shooting 36 up at 2 ASAs without practicing.
Well, congratulations. And
yes,
for all that you accomplished. And for those of you like, well, if I had the time, Tanja is a mom, a wife. Are you working full-time at GAS, right?
Not full-time, no. I don't know how many hours it is, but it's not full-time. Yeah.
Wife, mother, working a job, continuing archery, and still beating everybody. It can be done.
That's right. Well, thanks, Tanja. We appreciate your time today.
Thanks for having me.
Josh, we appreciate your time too.
Thanks, BJ. We appreciate your time. And most importantly, Kyle, we appreciate you back there.
Folks, the Competition Archery Media Podcast, you can find that on all the platforms where you find your favorite podcast. Thanks for joining us today.